When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With twinspires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with twinspires. And now you can race to victory with twinspires tournaments.
Welcome back to the twinspires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with Vance Hansen, and Jason Beem is once again joining us to talk all things Tampa Bay Downs, including the Grade 3 Tampa Bay Derby from this past Saturday. And we'll also look at the stakes on the undercard, plus what else caught our eye from the weekend, as we always do, to close out our show. And before we jump in, Jason, I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about your experience working at Tampa Bay Downs as a race caller, and also what we might want to look out for this week on your podcast.
Yeah, no, Tampa's been an unreal place to work. This is my fourth season here, and so we just finished my fourth Derby. But I mean, obviously the weather is a big perk of being down here this time of year. I think it's 75 today, as I'm at the Ocala sale here in beautiful Ocala, Florida. But no, they've been awesome to me. They treat me great there. Everybody that worked there has been there for 20 years, so it's like it very much is a family type place. So I'm really, really lucky to work there. And yeah, the race this weekend was awesome, and we'll talk about that obviously in the podcast. We have Travis Stone on today, who's going to call for me up at Virginia for the Virginia Derby this weekend, and tomorrow Gabe Pruitt, who's the new head man at Hoosier Park. So that's what we got coming up this week.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely have to check that out. And real quickly, I wanted to mention too, as I always tell you every week, we have Derby Week tickets and Spring Meet tickets available at KentuckyDerby.com. So head there to get those tickets before the last weekend of April and the first weekend of May. All right, let's move over to the Grade 3 Tampa Bay Derby. That was kind of confusing how I said that. But the Grade 3 Tampa Bay Derby happened on Saturday, and Owen Almighty went gate to wire, pulled off a little bit of an upset in that race. And Jason, you had the call on the race. Tell me, what were your thoughts from the Tampa Bay Derby?
Yeah, I mean, it was a good start this year, there's been a couple times in these big races where there haven't been. So I was happy for that. But I think the early tale of this race was the pace being as slow as it was. 48 and change. It was a day where the track was playing pretty quick. Not the fastest I've ever seen by down, but up there. And Owen Almighty, just you see that first turn, was just able to relax nice and easy, and he gets into a real easy beat down the back stretch. And as they go to the turn, you know, Pat Adams meanwhile kind of getting hung out wide. And if there's a little part right here where Owen Almighty goes out to the 4, who then goes out a little bit, and you see Patch Adams lose a spot. And I thought that was a really interesting part of the race because I was looking at the leader, so I just kind of noticed that Patch Adams dropped back and didn't really see what happened. But I thought the pace is a big part of this. And Owen Almighty, he hasn't really run a bad race. Like, he's just super honest. Everybody seems to think the distance is going to be his downfall if he wants to go the 1.25 miles. But I mean, he came home sub 24 for this last quarter, and I don't know. I was impressed by it. I'm inherently very biased about Tampa Stakes winners, so I admit that.
Apologies that I dropped off and I missed a lot of your explanation. But Vance, I know you were there to hear it, so I'll let you jump in next.
Yeah, the connections of Owen Almighty were quite vocal going into this race, that they were kind of using this as a prep for the Pat Day Mile. But after the way he won this race so convincingly at the end, you wouldn't be surprised if they do catch Derby fever and wind up pointing him toward the Kentucky Derby. But as Jason said, this race was all about the pace, and he got a very easy trip all the way around, and I think it would be very hard to replicate that in another Derby prep or in the Kentucky Derby itself. So, if their first gut instinct was to make this a prep for the Pat Day Mile, there's often something to be said for listening to your gut instinct, and so the connections are going to have something to think about in the weeks ahead, whether they want to go with the original plan or decide to go to the Kentucky Derby. I thought Chancellor McPatrick and Hill Road, the second and third place finishers, both ran well. Both hadn't run since the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Both were running with blinkers on for the first time, and I think wearing blinkers seemed to work for both of them from the standpoint that they raced much closer to the pace than they usually did as 2-year-olds. I suppose if I was going to take one or the other out of this race to look forward to, I think Hill Road is really going to benefit from extra distance. He's a a bit of a late closer. He didn't get the pace that he needed in this race, and I would expect him to be a really big threat come Kentucky Derby time if he qualifies. I think he's going to the Wood Memorial next, while Chancellor McPatrick is going to run in the Bluegrass. So I expect Chancellor McPatrick and Hill Road to step forward, take a step forward in their next preps.
I don't have a lot to add, and apologies if I say anything that you said, Jason, because I am having internet issues and I missed some of the explanation. But
That's all right.
as far as Owen Almighty, he did have the second fastest Tampa Bay Derby time behind Tacitus. And as you all have talked about, obviously Brian Lynch has different ideas about his future compared to maybe what ownership is wanting to do, with the Kentucky Derby being on the table with 65 points on that leaderboard. But as you mentioned, Vance too, Chancellor McPatrick and Hill Road, those are big takeaways here. Chad Brown said they both looked like Kentucky Derby contenders after that race, and the way they galloped out, he felt very confident that they could potentially handle that mile and a quarter. And the blinkers did seem to benefit both of them. I also wanted to mention Patch Adams finished fourth yet again. It was a bit of a disappointment for me and seemed to break slowly, second straight start. So he's going to need to really step forward. And I don't know if he really has plans now to still try to point toward the Derby, or if Brad Cox is going to look to do something different after this start, because that was a pretty disappointing finish, a distant fourth in this race. Let's talk about the other stakes on the undercard. So Vance, what were your thoughts or your takeaways from some of that other stakes action? Did anybody stand out to you?
There were no great surprises among the winners. I thought, at least for 3 of the 5 stakes, having been active over the winter perhaps made a difference between winning and losing. We talked about the Tampa Bay Derby. Owen Almighty had been running all winter compared to the Chad Brown horses. If you looked earlier in the card, Most Wanted from the Brad Cox barn, he was making his season debut against Skippy Longstocking in the Challenger Stakes, and Skippy won that race again. Most Wanted did run a pretty good race off the layoff, and this was obviously a starting point for him to kind of get warmed up a bit for some bigger races down the road. Another example of that was the Hillsborough Stakes, with Saffron Moon coming off a win in the Endeavor Stakes, but a really good race from the South African import, Give Me Another, who hadn't run in 11 months. So I think both of those races were good starting points for those horses. I guess if I mention one other horse that kind of caught my eye on Saturday, and that was Reagan's Wit, the runner-up in the Columbia Stakes to Zulu Kingdom. He had only broken his maiden second time out at Fairgrounds in his most recent start, but he wasn't beaten by much by Zulu Kingdom, who was a vastly more experienced horse and a more accomplished horse. This was his 3rd stakes win in the Columbia. So I think Reagan's Wit is one to watch for in the 3-year-old grass stakes in Kentucky this spring for Cherie DeVoe.
Jason, what about you?
Sorry, but I was having a little internet issues too. Can you repeat that?
Oh, I was going to ask what stood out to you from the stakes action.
You started coming back right at the end.
No.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. We were just talking about the stakes action. Who did you think was impressive from this weekend?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ditto Vance on Saffron Moon and Give Me Another. Give me. If you watch the race, Give Me Another just completely followed Saffron Moon. Like, they took exactly the same path for the final quarter mile. And once Give Me Another really had clear daylight, it became evident that she's got a pretty potent kick. And I talked to Will Humphrey, who actually gallops Give Me Another in the morning in Florida, and he couldn't speak higher of the horse. Like, he was real confident she was going to win, and she almost did. And so I look for Give Me Another to be a real player in that division. I mean, the acceleration that last 50 yards was pretty once things opened up. And Saffron Moon's obviously a nice horse.
Yeah, Give Me Another and Reagan's Wit. I both had those as my win picks, and I felt like I was a bridesmaid all weekend. I gave out picks this weekend, and I had 6 runner-ups and 4 finished by, I think, a neck margin or a half length. So it was one of those days in horse racing. But I was going to also note Zulu Kingdom had nearly a track record in that Columbia Stakes, just 0.33 seconds off the course record, with a final time of 1:33.24, was coming off a 4-month layoff and scored his third stakes win. All have come by a margin of a neck. So he has some very close stakes victories there that could have maybe gone a different way. But he improved to 3 for 4 for his career and is probably showing up in the Transylvania next, a grade 3 at Keeneland. And then Regenswit, I think we all were impressed, had a 99 brisnet speed figure, a career best, coming off that 8-length victory at Fairgrounds to break his maiden. And then Skippy Longstocking did, in fact, set a track record when accomplishing the three-peat in the grade 3 challenger. And now he is going to look to defend his title over at Oaklawn in the Oaklawn Handicap on April 19th. So the challenger was reduced to 4 horses, and yes, most wanted was coming off a lengthy layoff and maybe with a race under his belt could have had a better showing. But Skippy likes this track a lot and I think is undefeated from Tampa. So no surprise to see him do well this weekend.
He likes that race a lot, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Probably coming back next year too. Well, let's move over to what else caught our eye from the weekend. So Jason, what was that for you?
Yeah, I believe it was the 6th race of the day. It was a first-time starter for Anthony Sciametta, who's filling in for Todd Pletcher while he's on suspension. And so I think it was a Rapoli horse, but I think a lot of people didn't see Pletcher's name, so they were maybe confused. But Accelerize was just awesome. And you could tell midway on the turn, just looked so strong. The horse who ended up running second, who's second when they turned for home there in the white cap, I believe it's Moment's Notice, made a big move on the turn. It was kind of an eye-catching move after a little bit of a bad start. So I actually kind of looked at both these top two as potentially pretty good horses. It's a West Point horse that's runner-up, but if you look at Accelerize, I mean, this is a debut going 7 furlongs and going, what was it, sub 122 or just over 122 was, I thought, pretty, 121. And I mean, they were smoking down the lane. And, there's always numbers and then there's eye test. That was an eye test horse for me.
Oh, yeah. Vance, what about you?
Perhaps we saw a filly that could seriously challenge Torpedo Anna in the older female division on Saturday, and that was Cavalieri, who improved her record to 4 for 4, winning the Beholder Mile at Santa Anita in a come-from-behind fashion. She's a late developing daughter of Nyquist. She only began her career late August of last year, but now she's perfect around 2 turns, 4 for 4. Dual graded stakes winner, also having first notched the La Cañada Stakes in January for trainer Bob Baffert. And on Saturday in the Beholder Mile, she beat a respectable field. Richie is a great graded stakes winner in South America and in the U.S., also trained by Baffert. She ran very well in this race. And then further up the track was Tarifa, who was one of the better 3-year-old fillies not named Torpedo Anna last year. So a good race by Cavalieri. Don't know when she might butt heads with Torpedo Anna. The Apple Blossom Handicap is going to come up perhaps a bit too soon for that. That's in about 4 weeks or 4 or 5 weeks. But I could see Cavalieri running in a race like the La Troyenne at Churchill Derby Week and or the Ogden Phipps at Saratoga at the Belmont Festival. Those are logical spots, and perhaps we could see in the Ogden Phipps at Saratoga a showdown between this filly and the Horse of the Year.
Speaking of the Horse of the Year, we got to see her in action this weekend, and Torpedo Anna did get a win in her 4-year-old debut in the Azeri. Had a little bit of a challenge from Free Like a Girl in the stretch, but then kicked it up a notch and ran away with a 3.5 length victory in this race at 1 1/16. And now the Apple Blossom is up next for her, according to Kenny McPeak. And Torpedo Anna, she put in a 95 brisnet speed figure. I believe Cavalieri had a 97 with her win over at Santa Anita. But off to a good start for Torpedo Anna, who also was the champion 3-year-old filly last year. But I also wanted to mention another older female performance, which was over at Gulfstream in the Hurricane Birdie. And that was from nic'sstyle, who accomplished her 4th straight win, and it was her first graded stakes tally over the weekend. She got up in time to win by a quarter length in her second start of the season and is now 7 for 8 lifetime. Her one loss was over a sloppy track at Aqueduct in the Grade 2 Gallant Bloom. It was the 3rd time also in 4 years for Bill Mott to win the Hurricane Birdie, and it was also the 3rd time in 5 years for regular rider Junior Alvarado. So another older horse, but in the sprint, running at sprint distances, so not going to run into Torpedo Anna, I don't think. probably anytime ever.
Very unlikely.
Very unlikely.
Yeah, we got to see nic'sstyle at Tampa a couple times, and I mean, just knows how to win. And one of the times I thought she was beaten, she still got there. Thought for a split second, and this one she wasn't going to get there. I mean, just a cool horse.
Oh yeah. All right, well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you, Jason, for joining us once again.
Oh, anytime. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Hope you enjoy the sales, and we will be back next Tuesday to recap the Virginia Derby card at Colonial Downs. First ever time it's the Kentucky Derby prep race. And yeah, we'll talk some more stakes action and, of course, what else caught our eye from the weekend. We'll see you next time.
When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With twinspires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with twinspires. And now you can race to victory with twinspires tournaments.